Here to tell us more about her involvement with the Breast Cancer Pink Ribbon campaign, please welcome Elizabeth Hurley. Welcome, Elizabeth. This is something that you feel incredibly passionate about, and you've spoken before. One of the things that I find so incredible is that it's 25 years now since this campaign started. To us, it's kind of always been there, but if you take us back to that time when there was no campaigning for breast cancer, there was no pink ribbon.
It's true. 25 years ago, when Evelyn Lauder started this campaign, there was no Breast Cancer Awareness Month, no pink ribbon. And she said to me right at the beginning of this campaign, she said, women all over the world are dying of breast cancer and no one is talking about it. And I want to change that. And that's what started really this whole movement. And she co-created this pink ribbon, which, you know, has become a sign around the world. And I thought it was quite interesting that at the time she said, I don't want to trademark this, even though they made it up. She said, because I want everyone to use it, which they have. So really, in terms of awareness, so much has been achieved in the 25 years.
Actually, in your grandmother's day, nobody would have talked about it at all.
They didn't talk about it and she didn't talk about it. And it's a source of enormous sadness to me that I feel if she'd been diagnosed today with what we know now, with the advances they've made in treatments, with diagnosis, with awareness, the way we talk about it, I feel it could have been different for her. And I'm sure everybody who, you know, has had this awful experience in their lives just have these terrible regrets that it didn't come sooner, which makes us so much keener to now say there has to be a time when we don't talk about any breast cancer awareness anymore because there isn't any breast cancer. We need to get to that day.
It's extraordinary that 25 years ago was the start of sexual freedom. We had the pill, we had so many other freedoms in our lives, and yet there was this stigma to self-examination, which is at the key, isn't it, of making people aware of breast cancer.
It is, and that was the difficulty at first, I think, the fact that no news shows said the word breast. It wasn't on the front of magazines. We certainly wouldn't have been sitting here on a huge TV show talking about breasts and self-examination. We wouldn't have doctors there telling us how to examine our breasts. It's huge progress. It's amazing progress.
Do you think your grandmother was embarrassed then?
I think she was embarrassed. I think she was scared. She didn't know anything about breast cancer. As far as they knew, it was a death sentence. We know it's not a death sentence now if caught early enough. We know there's a 90% chance of a survival if it's caught early enough. We also know if it's not caught early and the tumour gets much bigger, it's much harder to deal with. She didn't know any of that. We didn't know any of that. We didn't know, which we've now found out, that people who have breast cancer are so enormously comforted by hearing other people's stories, knowing they're not alone, having a safe haven to go to sometimes. All those things are things we've learnt now. We didn't know anything when my grandmother had it, and she didn't talk about it. She didn't share. I feel we weren't there for her in a way that we should have been, but we didn't know anything either.
But you see, I find myself in a very unusual situation because apart from losing my daughter to breast cancer, I also lost my mother to breast cancer. And a bit like your grandmother, in those days, I mean, my mum just had a little bit of eczema under one of her breasts and went to the doctor and gave her a tube of cream. Now, she never challenged the doctor to say, even though she went regularly for arthritis, never said, oh, by the way, this never went away. And similarly, he never said, by the way, did that eczema clear up? So in actual fact, I feel like I felt really almost like I was going to sue the doctor, the GP, because I thought he hadn't given her the service that he should have. And it was just the big C then. And, you know, people took what the doctor said as the norm and didn't challenge ever.
But I think doctors' attitudes have changed as well.
Definitely.
Because of the increased awareness.
I'm sure they have. And, you know, we still say to everybody, even though there are all these advances in treatments, you still are responsible for checking your own breasts and you're still responsible for going fast to the doctor if you have a problem.
Your instinct, I suppose.
Yes.
If a doctor tells you you're fine and you really feel there's something different, you've got to have the courage to challenge them on it.
Don't you think the other thing is, Elizabeth, there was a lot of scaremongering about mammograms. A lot of scaremongering, like this is the most painful process you'll ever have to go through, and if you've got small breasts, it's not going to be easy, and so on. And what I'd say to women is, it's not that bad.
Of course not. It's slightly uncomfortable. It certainly hurts less than stubbing your toe. That's for sure. Which we do all the time. It takes seconds, minutes, and it doesn't hurt.
Don't you think as well that that one of the reasons that women are frightened to go for a mammogram or even an ultrasound, or sometimes even the doctor, is you're scared of the answer?
Of course we are. And my grandma, for sure, didn't want someone to confirm that she had a big lump in her breast. She obviously didn't want to hear that and hoped it would go away, a bit like putting your head under the pillow.
You were given a mammogram, weren't you, for your 40th birthday?
Yeah, Evelyn Lauder, who started this whole movement, gave me a mammogram and she made me promise to have them regularly, which I have.
But I challenge the NHS because, in actual fact, the age range only starts at 50, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
50 to what, 70?
I think it's shocking that on the NHS you can only get a mammogram at 50. Actually, it turns out to be 53 because then you're going to be every 3 years. But I started, like Elizabeth, having mammograms at 40 because I had close friends who had breast cancer, and then, you know, it is the most common form of cancer.
Yeah, 1 in 8 women will get it.
And also, you know, you don't just have a mammogram, you want to have an ultrasound scan as well, because for a lot of women, they have dense tissue in their breasts and you can't just tell it from a mammogram. So I feel also that the NHS is a bit lacklustre here. They should start screening women
I think the
much
gap is
younger.
just, you know, too narrow. But, I mean, my Karen was only in her 30s. When she got breast cancer. So there would never have been a chance of her having a regular mammogram. It wouldn't have been heard of at all.
And you're too young because the
Well,
breast
and
tissue is
also,
too dense.
I didn't know of any other girls in their 30s. I mean, I'm sure there were, but I had never heard of somebody in their 30s having breast cancer. So as Karen had just had a baby, the doctor and all of us thought it was just a milk lump and it would go away. But, of course, sadly,
it's
it
so
didn't.
important. I mean, I say this to my daughter. I've got 4 girls. That you've got to start as soon as possible.
You have to familiarise yourself with your breasts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you can note a change.
There is something that you feel a little bit awkward about it, but don't be. We say this all the time. It's so great that you come on a show like this, which is all by women, for women. Don't die of embarrassment. Even when you're in the shower, just have a little feel and get to know what is normal for you. I think that's the most important thing.
I think so.